morning. My subject this morning is generations, and particularly intergenerational responsibility. And I was inspired to do this a bit by seeing all those young people from the next generation here last week being baptized and thinking about the world they're moving to and our responsibilities to them. There's an old moral principle I'm sure you've heard, is that in leading our lives, we should try to be sure that we leave behind a better world for the next generation. And I did a little research this week to find out where that came from, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, the American philosopher, was the first person to make a big thing of that. But it was picked up by Robert Baden-Powell, who founded the Scouting movement. I guess I have to bend over to get closer to these mics. Who founded the Scouting movement, and leaving the world behind became a Scouting principle. And those of you who were in Cubs or Scouts or Brownies or Guides probably ran into that. I can recall it even extending down to camping philosophy, that when you left your campsite, you were supposed to leave it better than you found it. You might not meet the next people who are going to use it, but that was your duty to them. So how's the human race been doing by that standard of leaving behind a better world? Well, for most of the time, it's been doing fabulously well, because human standards of living and health have risen pretty constantly throughout human history. I joined the human race around the end of the Second World War, and my parents and grandparents certainly left me a better world. They'd been through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and many other struggles, and the world we inherited in the late 40s and 50s was primed for growth and boom, and we've gone on to lead lifestyles that they couldn't even dream of. In 1945, the average lifespan of a typical human was 46 years. That doesn't mean people were dying in their 40s. It means there was a lot of childhood mortality, which dragged down the average. Now it's 76 years, and even higher than that in developed countries like Canada. So in the past, we've done well, but how are we doing now in our responsibility to this next generation? Well, the Pew Research Institute, which is a large international polling group, did a survey recently, a global survey in 19 countries. And one of the questions they asked people was, do you think your children will be better off than you are, or will they have a tougher time? And the answer around the world was that 70% of people thought their children would have a more difficult time than they had had. And Canada was on the pessimistic end of the scale. 75% of Canadians thought their children's lives would be more difficult than their own had been. And this is a new thing for the human race, because we've seen so much progress and generally had so much optimism. So why is that? Why are people suddenly pessimistic about the lives of their children and future generations? I think a lot of it has to do with that we're suddenly becoming aware of the climate problems that we're living. People can see the world getting hotter every year, more turbulent every year. The huge forest fires we had in Canada were just an example of that. And at the end of the Second World War, there were about 300 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now it's over 400 and rising every year. A lot of the progress that we've seen during our lifetimes has come from burning of fossil fuels and dumping the waste carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So it's a difficult time. And Canadians are not a good example for people, because we have one of the highest rates of carbon emissions in the world. Our average carbon emissions per capita are 15 metric tons per person per year. That's higher than the US or Russia or China or any country in the European Union. Only Australia and a few of the Gulf states with oil industries have higher per capita emissions than we do. So from a world's perspective, it's a good thing there aren't too many Canadians, because we're not good for the world climate. So what do we do here? In the Bible, I think sometimes it said the most important commandment is that we should love our neighbors as ourselves. And I'm sure that's true. But to deal with these problems, we have to broaden the definition of neighbors a lot. So it means not just the people down the street or on the other side of the world, but the billions of people who haven't been born yet, who won't be arriving for 20 or 50 or 100 years. And we have a responsibility to make sure their campsite is as good as it can be. And we need to do a better job than we've been doing recently.